All right. Well, welcome to another edition of the Journey to Freedom podcast. And each week, and each day, and every time that we get to record one of these, I just learn more and more and more. And so, the goal is with the Journey to Freedom is how do we, as Black men, continue to move forward, knowing what happened in the past, knowing and learning from the past, but not getting stuck in the present and being able to move forward with whatever happened, the things that whether we grew up in a situation that wasn't optimal situation, or whether we've been in places where we've been discriminated against, or the systematic issues that have happened in our society are all parts of who we are, but are not the excuses or the reasons that we don't move forward. And a lot of the reasons, and there's 5 pillars that go with this. We have trust, and our ability to trust others, and how we grew up learning how to trust is so huge. We talk about our finances, and where does money come from? And I've had so many folks that are afraid to talk about money, and they tell me that money isn't important, when we all know it's up there with oxygen, right? It's the thing that allows us to trade and move forward and go backwards in our society. When we talk about health, the expectancy of a Black man in America is about 72 years old, where our white counterparts are much older. Why is that? What are some things that we can do to make sure that we're getting the right health care, that we're asking the right questions? We want to talk about our faith. We are rooted in our faith and have had the opportunity, and for most of us, whatever that faith is, whether it's whether it's the Christian faith, or it's the Muslim faith, or whatever that is there. How are we interacting within the faith and the faith in ourselves? And finally, when we talk faith and health, is health, trust, identity. Identity is the last part, and probably one of the most important is how do we show up on a daily basis? How do we show up at the grocery store when we've been taught to fear? How do we show up at our educational institutions when we think that we're not good enough, or we're not able to achieve? And so today I'm so excited because we have the president of the Aurora Community College of Aurora, Dr. Mordecai Brownlee, and I want to just thank you for being on today. He has some incredible Instagram. He's meeting technology right on head to head, and so I encourage you to look him up, to see some of the things that he's saying, how he's working with young students, whether they're Black, white, or whatever they are. He has this vision to make sure that we have the right education that's going to take us where we want to be. And so, like I said, I thank you for being on. I'm going to let you kind of just tell your story, and maybe we can start out there. Is how did you get to be a president, of a college? What is it that happened in your life that separated you, or not separated you, or just the people who told you that you could do it? Because I think a lot of our identity comes from our associations. And so maybe you can just kind of talk about, your experience in growing up, and then we'll just go back and forth and, take some next amount of time and just find out what it really takes. And then maybe give some really great inspiration, motivation. I know that's a lot of that is intrinsic, but more thought process on what folks can do. So thank you for being on.
Thank you, Dr. Arnold, for having me. It's an honor to be with you, and thank you for the work that you're doing in the community. I would share that, I was raised by a single mother who was an educator, a K-12 educator. Mom taught for 30 plus years and special education as well, spent a significant amount of time there. We moved around a whole lot, and I honestly believe that part of that moving around a whole lot, originally from the Midwest, Toledo, Ohio, on down to landing in Texas, in Galveston, Texas, and then finally finishing up school there in Humble, Texas. But that had a bit of an impact, I think, in my academic preparedness, because when I graduated high school, I was testing at developmental levels in math. And so at that particular time, we've since been able to address her health. But at that time, my mother's health was failing, and I didn't necessarily have the option of going off to school. So I worked an overnight shift at the airport breaking down trucks, and then made a promise that I would still continue my higher education. So signed up for those developmental courses in that morning. So I would get off at 10 to 6 a.m. Would work that overnight, show up to class at 8 o'clock, and did that for quite some time, up until the point of essentially failing developmental math, in which at that point I just said, I'm done with this, and began to try to find other odd jobs and things to just help out. But what ended up happening in my particular situation was is that they no longer needed our help at the airport, and someone ended up saying, "Hey, because of your financial situation, going up there to the college and work there, called work study." And essentially, for those that are watching this, listening to this, work study is a scholarship that you can work for at your local college. And so I ended up doing that and flipping burgers in the cafeteria and running lights and sound in the theater department, and working in the library. What ended up happening, I want to you bring honor to his name, Dr. Williams. He's since passed, but being able to be surrounded by African American men for the first time, really in my academic career, and them being able to pour into me and share that, you know what, you can be more, you can do more. These kind of engagements were something that I was hungry for and hadn't necessarily experienced outside of the faith sector of my church. And I'm very grateful for those deacons and those different men, but I didn't have it outside of that realm. That was extremely beneficial towards me beginning to achieve a sense of agency, to say that whatever my path is going to be, it's doable. Then I would say that from that time really began to be my interest in working in higher education, and then from there transferred and began to do that. I've now since served. This is my seventh institution that I've served. I've served at two historical Black colleges and universities. I currently still teach, even though I serve as president. I teach out of the School of Business and Leadership in the University of Charleston. And in summertime, I support where I earned my doctorate at Lamar University, and the work that I continue to do in terms of advancing. The other thing that I was not exposed to was content by African American men that would feed me in terms of where I was in my particular point of development. So I've addressed that by writing and publishing, and I've served as a columnist most recently now for Diverse Issues in Higher Education magazine. And so just any way that I can be a part of advancing positive content. I was very honored by what you shared, Dr. Arnold, about my social media engagements. I told someone years ago when I started this work, didn't necessarily know everything and how to do it, but I started releasing these YouTube videos just as a way to encourage others. The idea there truly was to say there's enough negative content out there for our children and for ourselves to digest and ingest every day. What does it look like for us to be a part of the solution of positive content being created and creating content that can be a breakthrough opportunity? And yes, the written form has traditionally been how we've approached this work in higher education, but now we've got to lean deeply into the 30-second videos, into the 1-minute videos, and how we're going to be the content creators, because you never know how our content can lead someone towards transformation. And so it's been an honor to serve Community College of Aurora. At the time of us recording this, I'm almost 3 years into the presidency. This summer of 2024 will be 3 years of me relocating my family, most recently from San Antonio, Texas. And it's been an absolute blessing. Great community. We're growing, we're thriving, and a lot of work is ahead, but committed to making sure that we get this job done.
Oh man, that is so neat that you're there. And I'll just kind of jump into when I think about the pillars, and I think about trust, and I think about being able to show up with trust. Have there been through your journey, and it sounds like you spent some time definitely in the South, you were in Texas, you were in the Midwest. Was there ever a time that you had issues with trust, or trusting the process, or trusting? What did that look like, and how did you overcome some of those trust issues that allowed you to move forward?
Well, it's a very powerful question. I would tell you what I did not trust were the educational system. I had this issue coming through the educational system that the content did not resonate with me, and it was this all for one, all fits all, one size fits all approach that felt very bland. And did not feel as though it spoke to the essence of who I was, and there were no other engagements that spoke to that. And so, as I am seeking at that particular time, was seeking my identity and the understanding of my identity as a young African American male, there was nothing there to be able to speak to that development and my identity of that. And there were so many forces, unfortunately, being raised in the South to where conformity was the recipe for the day, every day. and assimilation. And so, and I do believe in the power of code switching and how we are to within ourselves be able to interact in different environments. However, I would tell you, one can get lost in all the code shifting if you have not rooted yourself in your personal identity of who you are. Because as you begin to shift in these different environments and spaces, one can lose themselves, especially if there's no moral compass that has been established, a sense of personal integrity that has been established. So, in the midst of all of that, I'm watching favoritism. In the midst of all of that, I'm watching there not be what appeared to be an absence of integrity and equity, and this idea of what I believed equity now is an understanding of. But in the midst of that, this is before some of these evolutions about what equity then meant as a millennial coming through this system, because I'm then saying that I am not starting at the same base as some of my peers. Why isn't there systems to support me where I am in my particular journey? And then only being met with then, well, you're either college material or you're not. And so I think that now we've progressed into understanding that that's unacceptable, and that does not speak to the identity of who the individual is. But this is before those evolutions. And I would still say we still have a ways to go. Mainstream, while is a word now, the way in which it's even utilized in a very divisive manner, we can understand when one says pull yourself up by the bootstraps, but we don't yet understand on a mainstream what do we do when that person doesn't have any bootstraps?
Yes.
And so we still have a ways to go. So trust of the educational system, lack of trust with the wealth creation, and the systems and the infrastructure that lead to personal finance, and the achievement of wealth, which I would tell you then was part of my lack of trust in terms of society and what pop culture was sending my way. This belief that in order to, as an African American male, to achieve wealth, I have to be an athlete or a rapper. And there were not these other interactions and images of wealth to help me understand that there were other pathways towards achieving not only wealth, but real wealth, lasting wealth, generational wealth.
Wow, that is so deep. I love it. And you brought up identity, and you said, rooted. I think I wrote it down. Root yourself, in your own identity. And we think about, the last, 200 years or 300 or 400 years that we hear about, that we talk about, that is prevalent in the conversations that we have. We talk about, in the 60s and 70s, when Black men were kind of taken out of homes, as we were thriving in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and all of a sudden we're taken out of homes. What can you say? You were raised by a single mom, helped you create the identity? Were there associations? Were there certain people that were in place, or was it just the books you read? Help me find out how your identity was shaped in a society that was trying to strip that identity from you, or systems, I guess I should say.
Very good. I will tell you, there's two parts to this. One is the transferable skill set that I didn't even realize I was developing. I was raised in a Pentecostal church, and in the Pentecostal church in the South, you're either going to be a musician or a preacher, or both. You didn't have too many other options: musician, preacher, or both. And I will tell you, being raised in that environment, I decided to become a musician. Well, in the Pentecostal church, when you're in church every day,
Every day.
all the time, especially as a musician, you're really, you're what they call shredding. You're really getting pretty good in order to be able to play, because there is a slew of other children that are also being raised the same way. So when it came time to larger services, based on your ability to be able to deliver and to play that instrument, allowed for you to either stay on an entire service to play that instrument, in my case the drums, or you got to tap on the shoulder to someone that had a higher skill set began to play, and you had to stand by and watch them play. And so I will tell you, I ended up learning this very interesting transferable skill set that has still served me to this day. And that is I never wanted to get the tap on the shoulder. I never wanted to get off the set. But when I did get to tap on the shoulder, it was usually by much older guys, teenagers at that particular point, that were guys that were in college. And what I would essentially do is sit back and I would watch their moves. I would watch their shreds. I would watch the combinations that they put together. And then I made sure that when I got back on the set, I stole it. And then I
There you
reincorporated it back into what it is that I
go.
do.
Yeah.
Right. And so it forced this interchangeable. We all got to get better because I'm going to play this song. You're not going to get me off the set. And I'm going to do what you just showed. It was the thing that got you on the set. So now I'm going to do it better than you. That became a transferable skill set that I think has served for me being able to find myself in society. Of that, anytime that I watched or I saw and had interactions with black male entrepreneurs, with men that I saw as businessmen that appeared on surface level to be successful. But I was able to get close enough to get those exposures, and I took what I saw to be the best of them. And then in some situations, I then began to observe behind the curtain all of the failures, the weaknesses of some of these men. I will tell you that that in itself was another journey because I know what I saw on stage, if you will. I know what I saw in the public. And then you get the view of what happens behind the scenes. And it's like, okay. And then in those moments, for a number of years, I had to wrestle with, okay, that's not the kind of man I want to be. But I do want to take the best of who you are. And that then is the transferable skill set that continue to play out. So I would say those two things, continuing to thrive towards other exposures, other opportunities, studying, whether it be images, whether it be in day-to-day interactions, whether it be through media, whether it be through all of these different facets of studying the black male and the image of success, pairing that with a lot of what my mother even showed me as old school movies coming up,
Okay.
and watching men like Sidney Poitier, and Harry Belafonte, and how they conducted themselves on screen. So beginning to put all of this together, and how they dress, how they carry, how they speak, the clarity, how they would control a room, and that pairing that with current day society and pop culture, and then pairing that with the transferable skill set that I learned as a child to not get off the drum set. And I think that those are all the things that have allowed for me to be able to, what I would say, speed up my trajectory towards executive leadership.
Oh, I love it. Well, and you said exposure, which was, one of those key words, and gaining that exposure. If you were talking to folks now who kind of have this belief that they don't have the ability, or they don't have the right word set, or they don't have the right skill set, or they've been kind of stuck based on where they grew up, but how would somebody gain that exposure? Other than you had that in the church to start out with, where there's a lot of young folks now who don't have some of that same upbringing that we were able to enjoy with our elders and seeing them. How do you gain, or as you're talking to your kids? I know you teach business there as well as an open door policy for folks to come in. How are you advising them on that exposure and how important it is?
I will tell you now, it's a everyday occurrence for us to get on social media and be able to be in another place in time.
Yes.
To get news and information in another place in time. We don't have to depend upon the 5 o'clock news, the 10 o'clock news to shape what we want to know about the world. We don't have to depend upon something that we just see in a classroom, and if it's going to be shown on, media day for us to get information. There is so much. I mean, the deregulation of information is what we now must use to our advantage. And making sure that our youth, our young adults, our working adults are fully understanding what has happened when it comes to information and the lack of control. There's the positive, the ability to get our hands on information like we have never been able to get our hands on information before, which then means then understanding that it doesn't matter who's present physically in your life. You have the ability to get a hold of information and to find mentors and with people who you may never even meet physically. You may never ever get the chance to meet this particular person, but there's enough content on that person to study the knowledge, and then you to conduct your own work and homework on that and the development of who you are. I think that in itself is powerful. The ability to be able to get a hold of those images. The other part of that is the intentionality behind it. The individual has to understand the power and the necessary actions on their part to intentionally seek such information. Students have asked me before, what is the purpose of college? And in a very bite-sized form, I tell them this is going to be one of the very first times in your life where you're going to be able to wrestle with what you've been told is real. You have lived under a roof that you've been told this is how you think about politics, about economics, about religion. This is what you think about society. And you have been forced into that level and then understanding of assimilation. And now, in many cases, especially moving off to college, one is now getting an opportunity to live with people that they would have never lived with before, have interactions that they would have never had before. And now they're going to hear and have some conversations within themselves from an intellectual standpoint. Do I really believe this? Is
Mm,
this real to me? And then you're being exposed to ideologies and methodologies that are now going to shape their own conceptual framework, where they're now going to shape their own realities, which I think is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Information, the deregulation of information has now made that possible. And we have to make sure that individuals understand the power of that. Now, here goes the caveat, the other side of the coin. Along with this deregulation of information, we also have a lot of false information, a lot
mm,
of false narratives out there. The deregulation doesn't necessarily mean that the information that they may be exposed to has been regulated in terms of its accuracies. It is narrative, agenda driven information. And so there is then the need that we've got to really strengthen our K-12 schools, our institutions of higher education, to teach what to look for, to break down what can be digesting what is truly false information. And we cannot depend upon these images, and just because a video said it meant that it's real. No, it's not. And so you got to be able to teach then how to be able to go and do your homework and to verify. Triangulation, we understand it as doctoral researchers. We understand triangulation. You don't just depend upon one source. How do
mm.
we pair this with other sources? But how do we then teach that in the everyday life of those that aren't living in that academic realm?
Wow, I should. So, as I'm thinking, as you're saying this, and I'm thinking, my wife, said to me yesterday, we were watching, some TikTok videos or something, and she's like, everybody wants to be famous, but everybody doesn't, but somehow the fame is what creates success.
Mm,
And you and I both know that, there's a lot of successful people that are not famous. And there's some people that I would even love to be, that aren't famous. How do you help our younger generation separate this need to be seen from the successes they can get intrinsically and that they can get from who they become I guess as a part of the process of us, teaching and education and all that?
very powerful question. I think that the answer in that lies in something that seems very simple, but it is not. And I think that this is where people get distracted and live their lives outside of the purpose that they God designed for them to live it within, and that is the lack of validation.
Yeah.
People need to have systems of validation. That need for validation then shows up in different spaces. It's what may encourage one to get involved in illegal activity because they are now associated with a community that validates them. The need for validation could cause one to be in a relationship that's abusive, but that individual has found a way to validate them, so they'll deal with the abuse in order to be validated. Validation can also lead one to then discover the essence in the full embodiment of who they are and who God intended them to be. But it was the right moment, the right time that gave them the right interaction that validated them. So I think that the essence of this lies in the intentionality behind the systems that we allow to validate us. And that it is very important then that we do not depend upon others to validate us. We must then find ways to validate ourselves. Easier said than done, but it is an infrastructure that will then best serve us because then as we lean deeply into purpose, as we lean deeply into our God-given purpose, we will then understand that when times externally where we aren't being validated, that we still lean deeply into our purpose. And then beyond, as we move through those seasons, we then find where we're supposed to be. We then find the community that we're supposed to have. And we're less dependent upon what may be the immediate because we're deeply able to understand what my God-given purpose is. And then I move forward into the season that then God has for me. And then we watch how alignments begin to happen. But usually what I've seen is when you begin to embrace that level of validation, you begin to shed a lot of what was because it has nothing to do what is and certainly where you're headed.
Wow. And I'm loving where we're going, because this is so important. And maybe you can unpack purpose for me, because that is such a hard concept. I think when you're young, because you're trying to find yourself and who you are, and you're trying to go, okay, God, why do you have me on this planet? Or why am I here? And then you're talking about the validation, which I see so much, is other people try to influence who you are in a big way based on who they are, and we're getting their own validation. I'm going to put you in this box because it validates me. And then sometimes we start living in that box that somebody put us in because we're there. So maybe you can help us just understand, how do we search for that purpose? How do we, find that purpose that ignites us, that makes us excited, that makes us want to continue to grow and continue to move on? And then, I want to move into family here in a minute, but yeah, how do we do that? How do we find that purpose?
My mother told me something many years ago when I was at the very beginnings of seeking to understand why I was put here on this earth, and that she asked me, "What is the thing that you do without thinking?
Hmm.
What is the thing that you do without thinking? What is the thing that you don't have to put any effort? It's just innately, it's in you. You do it." In a given situation, this is how you respond. In a given situation, this is what you're leaning towards in terms of thought. Or what is the thing that you really enjoy? That is personal. It's for you. It's something that you really enjoy doing. And that was the very beginnings, I would say, a kindergarten level understanding of, but it's a strong foundation of understanding, okay, well, this is what I am interested in. And I began to understand very early on that I like building things. I like building people. I like building systems. I like having a team and kind of being that team captain. I took pride in that. That meant something for me. That then grew into me understanding that I really have been put here to build teams and to build people. That then evolved into understanding that, again, that transferable skill set, that then being able to be in administration and realize the responsibility of creating these systems and infrastructures for individuals to thrive and to have parameters that then shape and lead a community of folks under one banner of an institutional mission. It then grew into that and understanding. Essentially, that's what I do every day as a college president. And so all of that grew from me realizing that, man, I really like team environments. I love leading teams, not being bossy, not being in control, but leading teams. Understanding, how do we lead through conflict? How do we take those moments and shape for them and people in the understanding that this is just an opportunity of refinement, yet we lead with grace to get towards the development and the understanding for all involved to grow through this situation. That was the beginnings of that. So then I would just say for anyone, that as they're still seeking to understand their
Yeah.
purpose and what they do, to perhaps conduct that exercise for themselves. And there's other elements of this that they can bring into that. They call it SWOT analysis, your own personal strengths, your own personal weaknesses, your own opportunities, things that you have yet to take fully advantage of in your personal life that it's just been on the table. And then the threats, those threats can be the things that have been battles for your particular bloodline and generation. The men in my family have had challenges. As I did that research, men in my family have had challenges with being able to finish what they start. They've been very intelligent men, but they haven't necessarily had the tools to be able to keep their families whole because of certain threats and weaknesses that they allowed to then take fully advantage of the responsibility that they had in their households. That's the stuff that I then studied and said I didn't want to be that. And then you get into what I was talking about code switching earlier, of understanding then this what's called pest analysis: political, economic, sociological, technological. It's a way of then taking a look and understanding the environment in which we dwell. And one cannot be a one trick pony. There's some folks that they get mad because they want to be serve in multiple dimensions of who they are, yet they keep showing up the same in these same spaces. And every space for your effectiveness requires you to do something different. I think that's then the pure essence of code switching, of how are we going to be effective and where our purpose is and what we've been put here to do, but to do it in many different environments. So I hope that answered your question, and let me
Oh,
know
it did.
the
It
other
did.
aspect of that.
Absolutely, because purpose is one of those things that if we don't chase it, we it kind of happens to us, and then our purpose is defined by somebody else, and it's so
That's right.
important to make sure that it's not. Let me switch to, just a little bit. Maybe we'll kind of talk about, whether it's finances or money or just success, because I 100% believe that success leaves clues. The things that I can see in others, and I'm watching others, and the things that they're successful in. You teach business. You run a multi-million dollar business as a president there. What are some of the things that you would say are some of those clues that somebody who's saying, I want to be successful, or I want to maybe even in leadership, I want to run something, I want to be better, and I believe that God put us on this planet to do better than we were the next day.
Mhm.
So we're better today than we were yesterday. We're better next week than we were this week.
That's
We should be better next month. And that perpetually needs to continue to go. But what are some of the things or the principles or the things that I should study, the things that I should work on that would allow me to continue that perpetual growth or that perpetual, I guess, eyes on success, because that's a moving target. You're never, as soon as you hit what you thought success was 5 years ago, now you hit it this year. Success is something different, probably for most of us as we try to move forward into our careers. So, what are some of those things that you would say as a business, as you?
Yeah, what I would share is that again, another one of those things that my mother taught me, and that was is she told me very early on that I needed to manage my life like a business.
Okay.
And I would then give the same advice to anyone that's watching and listening to this. If you can set up and do strategic planning for an organization, you better do better strategic planning for your own personal life. As we talk about purpose, I would encourage everyone to have their own personal mission statement.
Okay.
If you want to manage your life like a business, by doing that, you begin to understand from a strategic planning standpoint to understand the difference between goal setting and objective setting. And this is where I watch people fail because they are trying to build an entire life off of goals. Every strategic plan has seasons associated with it.
Mhm.
Who do you hear of with a 30, 40-year strategic plan? There's too many changes that then happen in the environment to where a
No
plan
way.
from 40 years ago is not even relevant today. And so I think that it's very important to then say, people with themselves to themselves, that I'm going to either develop a strategic plan for 3 years. I'm going to develop a strategic plan for my life for 1 year. But I would not encourage that being more than 4 or 5 years, as I would not for any organization, because there's too many changes that then happen in the environment. And as the environment shifts, one must then shift its objectives in order to accomplish its mission. So then it all goes back to my statement of, I really believe everyone needs to have a mission statement. My personal mission statement is Mordecai Ian Brownlee empowers the lives of others and builds systems that empowers the lives of others. I recite this to myself every day. If it falls in line with the mission, my personal mission, I do it. If it doesn't, I don't touch it. You won't see me there because it doesn't align with the mission. And then the objectives that sit under that, which are personal to me, are then things that all have goals associated with it.
Yeah.
But those goals are only held accountable by what we know in business and industry as key performance indicators. It's data. It's something that is actual measurable. And the example I would give in that is, at one point in time in my life, I weighed over 400 pounds. Now, I certainly have a ways to go. I still have a goal one day of weighing a certain amount, but I'm not over 400 pounds like I used to be. And so I had to then set goals that were measurable goals to get me to the point of not only my goals being addressed, but my objective, which to improve my overall health. Same thing with my sleeping. I had gotten used to only being able to survive with 3, 4 hours a night. Yet we talk about health, and then especially as African American men, we
Mhm.
talk about our cardiovascular health. We
Yeah.
talk about stresses. We talk about certain things that our African American men have historically dealt with that impact all aspects of our lives and our families' lives. And so I then needed to adjust my sleep schedule. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So, strategic planning, it is so important that we all go back to understanding, if you can strategically plan for an organization, you need to be strategically planning for your own personal life and your family. And we shouldn't be doing more for these companies than we do for our own family. And so that, I think, in itself is the essence of what integrity should look like.
Oh man, I love that. I love that. And just thinking in that whole realm of success and strategic planning and having. I love what you said about objective goals. not just, our objective planning, instead of just what am I trying to achieve here? Not this is my goal that I have to achieve, and once I achieve it, what do I do next?
Mhm.
When we talk about, and you kind of started alluding to the family unit, for Black men, the family unit has been, something where we say, hey, where do I see the success? I hate to go back to when I was in college and the Cosby Show was out, and thinking about hey, this is a family that we could see that is has a dad and has a mom and has these amazing kids that do whatever they do. That doesn't happen to be all of our lives, but I know you. I mean, you have children and you have an amazing wife that I've had the opportunity to work with in some manner sometimes. What is it that drives you, to keep your family unit not only whole and going, because we all have obstacles that we deal with, but that says that this is such an important aspect of my life that this is where I need to end up. Kind of talk to us about family and how important family is, as somebody who's looking to, hey, I might not have the best family, but like you said when you were a kid, right? This isn't going to be me. This is what's going to be me. So kind of walk me through that a little bit.
I think that I don't know where to tell you where that understanding came from for me, um, but I made a point that as I continue to learn about the histories of those that came before me and my family, and understand the talents that they had, yet what wasn't able to materialize. I, in the essence of just that I don't know where to tell you where it came from, but that belief, and maybe I just have to continue to give credit to my mother of continuing to showcase to me that at some point the curse has to break. At some point it has to stop. We have to live the embodiment of what we were put here to do, and we should not be putting and bringing harm to others in our family where we've been given the responsibility to lead our families. We talk about trust. It needs to be able to where my wife can trust me.
Mm.
I hear too many men talk about how especially in the South, it was something I was raised around, hearing men, especially in the barbershop, talk about a submissive wife and all these things. And I look back at that and I says, you know what? Why would she be submissive to something she can't trust?
Wow.
What? Why? I wouldn't. And this understanding of even understanding deeper levels of submission. Shouldn't we submit to one another? It's just this ignorance that's been allowed for years to be able to fester. That all has breaking down what I think was a God-given infrastructure that if we would have did it and stuck to the play, where would we be today? But unfortunately, now you've got a new generation of folks that's got to figure this thing out, tear up a lot of these old weeds and this old infrastructure and old ways of thinking, and then live to be the example. Because unfortunately, what I'll tell you, Dr. Arnold, is that we watch it. I'm watching it happen now with a national, world known comedian, where we've seen these images of African American men be raised to only be tore down because of their own shortcomings. And then where do we get to the images for our young black males to take a look at and says not only are they successful, but all aspects of their lives are successful. And even if they don't get something right, it's not these massive mistakes because they address the small mistakes. Small mistakes lead to the real big mistakes. So by the time that we hearing about it, you could have had many different warnings. How do we
Mhm.
teach that alarm system and build that alarm system within ourselves? And I think that then takes us teaching our children and being living examples of what does it look like to have that compass, to have that internal alarm system that should be going off. Because if you love yourself, you would not cause and create harm for someone else.
Mm.
You understand what's at stake,
Yeah.
and you understand then that yes, there's going to be varying perspectives and viewpoints, but I don't seek to bring harm. I don't seek to kill you as an individual. I seek to understanding the infrastructure of how we have constructive conflict, teaching our children, especially now in the age of social media, that we're going right from social media engagements to violence, right? And we're dealing with harm in a new, different way that we haven't dealt with before. And so all of these are the things that I think we have to address, and that comes to us living this out in our everyday lives in our own homes. And so there's a lot that I'm trying to button up, but I would just say that it's just innate within me that I just grew up saying that won't be me. And I look forward to there being more men of color, more men, African American men, being able to be a lived example, and we don't have to wait for the scandal to come out.
Amen. Amen. Talk about the joy of family. I mean, sometimes we just talk about all the aspects that are wrong with the family, and all the things and the hardships and the controversy, and family's family. But we do it because we love our family, right? We enjoy our family. So maybe talk about what drives you as far as your family and the things that you get to do, and the things that you wake up every morning excited about as a result of maybe some of the things that happen in your family.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I will tell you that my wife and I both come from single mothers. I will tell you that the joy of family is something that has had to be learned,
Mm,
because the idealism that sat before, that we were raised in, was the understandings that family did not have. Uh, it was more responsibility than joy. And I
gotcha.
think that there's a lot to unpack in that. That's a whole nother episode. But
Yeah, it is a
yeah, that's a
lot.
whole nother episode, right? But to learn joy of family versus the responsibility of family, the burden of family, the lack of family. And then you get into what is a whole nother series of unpacking, where family has been used as a framework to manipulate,
Wow. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So then it's the reason why I will tell you, in business and industry, I do not refer to my organization or the folks within my organization as a family. Because if we were to be honest, the idealism around family can mean many different things to many different people.
Mm,
And so how much
absolutely.
trauma has been passed down thanks to their families. So then the terminology that I then use is team. We're a team, which then
Mm,
gives me a framework for everyone to understand their positionality, the responsibility of covering ground for the next person, and all of that goes with having a successful championship winning team. So that's the terminology that I then use. But to go back to family, I would say we've had to learn joy. And I would tell you then that it was an understanding of what love, but what healthy love looks like.
mhm.
And so I'm very grateful then I've been able that God paired me with someone who was willing to be thirsty enough to to strive for what is the essence of what family should have been. That even though we've never experienced it, now we're committed to creating the framework to what it should look like. Not for the image of social media,
Mhm.
but for the essence of what is pleasing to God's design.
Amen. Amen. Can we think about parenting and lessons that you have for your kids? The things I have 8 children and I have 13 grandkids now, and so
Wow.
this is a daily conversation of what is it that I you can't control your kids, especially as mine are adults now. So there's definitely nothing I can do to control them. But the things that you try to impart, the lessons that you want them to learn, the things that you don't want them to experience. We hear this helicopter parent thing all the time where they don't get to experience anything because you're controlling everything. But then there has to be that time where they get to become, and you see it now because they come to your college, as different people. But what are some of those lessons that you go, okay, these are the non-negotiables, and then you might not be able to think of all of them right now, but some of the things that with your children that you want to make sure that they're rooted in, that they're grounded in, that they have that foundation.
I'll answer that with one thing because there's a lot there. One thing that my wife and I make sure to help our children understand, that by no means are they better than anybody.
Mm,
Everybody has the same value.
yeah.
However, 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 uh, you're not better than anybody, but you are different than other people. And there's so much to unpack in that. But it's value. It's that sense of validation. It's
Mhm.
the understanding that you're to respect everybody, but there's a standard that you're going to live by and understand. Because there's too many folks that come before us that have made too many sacrifices. In understanding the essence of who you are and who's come before you, then you got to understand then what you've been called to do in this given point in time. And by embracing your personal purpose, you're going to understand that you're not better than
Mm-hmm.
anybody, but you are different.
You're
You
different.
are different, and you are to embrace what that then means for them, for them. And then I'm to hold them to that regard, to not live in my shadow, not to be the second coming of a Mordecai Brownlee. They ought to be the fullness of who they are. Then by me doing my job, they'll be able to do theirs, and then those that come after me can do theirs. But we'll all have an understanding that we're not better than anybody, but we are different from, and that comes with a responsibility.
I'm getting so much good advice here. I'm just writing down like crazy. And I'm all over the place in my thoughts and where I want to go. Faith, you know, Dr. Brownlee is a man of faith, and faith is played a pretty big, I guess, role in your life. Kind of talk about how faith has integrated into who you are, no matter where you show up.
You know what I'll say, and I know we're coming to a close here, but I would say that for me, it is the fullness of who I am,
Mm-hmm.
and I have had to go along on my own first personal faith journeys, where I talked about that moments of discovery. There was what I was raised in, but then there's what I had to understand for my own self, and I do think that that has also helped me to understand that there is a bit of, um, especially again being raised in the South, what we were taught, and utilizing the faith still through the church, and to outright state I am a Christian, follow Jesus Christ, and I would say though that my understandings of faith and Christianity have continued to evolve over time. I will tell you that unfortunately, because of, and this goes back to the roots of slavery, some of those spaces and places that I was learning faith were rooted in a disadvantaged perspective. The one day we shalls. I remember being sitting in a church service, and it just vexed me so that the pastor at that given point in time was talking about how God was going to bless people with credit cards.
Oh wow!
And I do you understand? And so that's just one example for you. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that now looking back, if we're to talk about creating credit, to understanding how to leverage, to then understand, we get into some of these other aspects of business, but that ain't where he was coming from.
No, no.
He was talking about God giving you that 30 percent APR
Mm-hmm.
credit card, so you can be
Woo!
down at the buffet line.
Yeah,
You're right, and we get into these teachings that God gonna bless you with this and God gonna bless you with that. We never got into the understandings of budgeting. We never got into the understandings of investing. We never got into how do we build an infrastructure towards wealth, so then we even understand the power of a 10%. Being raised around this whole idea of the prayer line, and the money, you got to have money in your hand. Again, this is not what Christianity should have ever been about. But
yeah.
unfortunately, those were some of the exposures that I then had growing up. And I'm very grateful that I was able to grow out of that, because you got to spot a hustler where a hustler is. And
Mm-hmm.
it just has different forms of it. That ain't got nothing to do with following Jesus Christ. And so I would tell you then that yes, it is deeply rooted in who I am, but I'm very grateful for the journey that I've been on to understand that what the essence of it truly is.
Wow, that's great. Well, the last few minutes, and I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about education,
Yes.
because it's what it is you do. It's what I'm part of and what I've done for many years. And uh, kind of walk me through like education for since we're talking about black men here and the importance of education and the different avenues are options. I think sometimes we pigeonhole ourselves into this is my only option. I got to go get this. I got to go with this skill, and I'm not going to. Talk about how education can help us progress forward.
Education, and let me be honest and tell you the right kind of education.
Please, please.
The right kind of education can help one progress forward. The best book, one of the best books in the world, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, by
Mm,
Pablo Freire, who
yes.
broke down the oppressiveness of what these educational systems can do and the indoctrination that can come about with one. And how all of this has impacted third world countries, and the power of what the essence of what real truth and what it can do for one. And I think that that's part of the war that America is having within itself now, of not wanting to deal with some truths. Because if we were to be honest and deal with some real truths, we would then not only be convicted in what it is that we've allowed to take place, but now we're going to get into true understandings of wealth and what we consider some to be wealthy, but what they built that wealth on. And then we get into a whole nother element of infrastructure and having to break down and tear these systems that we have now held to be true. And I don't think that America wants to deal with that, because once America takes its makeup off, if you will, I'm only using that figuratively speaking, we're gonna realize that it's beautiful from within, but it's got some ugly blemishes to it. And I don't think that we want to really deal with that. And so I would say that a lot there to unpack, but the education in itself, the pureness of it, one should continue to always pursue the truth. And by pursuing the truth, they can then get to a discovery of their own truths. And by becoming in alignment and understanding, having full understanding of the truths that are within, we then are able to have the tools to be equipped to live out our purpose. And then we get into the understanding that it doesn't take anybody to tell me, I know how to find it for myself. And that's that resilience. That's the essence of what does it mean to strive towards truth and the truth that I'm to be. And I won't allow you to tell me no. Your no is only the truth that you want me to understand about the realities that you've accepted. That's not my no. That's your no. That's not
Mhm.
my no. And that's then I think is the power of what education should be. But unfortunately, we have school systems to where instructors, teachers can even teach these children. They haven't to prepare them how to take tests. And that's a whole nother conversation that I just can't stand. And I've done research around standardized testing. It does have its purpose, but we now live in a day and time where that is essentially the infrastructure that we've allowed to raise our children. Testing, not development. Those are two different things.
So how can I, as an individual, so now let's say I'm a young adult, and I want to make sure that I'm educating myself. What are the steps that I should take? I mean, I know there's the social media and trying to figure out what's real and what's not real. I know there's institutions of education that I can go to. I know there's church stuff that I can go to. I know there's all these different information is being bombarded at me all the time. How do I choose and pick what's going to be right for me, the best for me, or even options that I have that I may not know that I have?
Lot in that question. I would only go back to earlier in our conversation and just say that
Okay.
it is very important then that as development, it goes to something that you said earlier about development and that every day we should be getting better. If we embrace the value of who we are, we then will understand and have a basis on what we hold to be true. And understanding that there's a ton of information out there, but the information that may be present may not resonate with who we are. It also comes with a sense of accountability. There's going to be information that we come across that is true and it's factual, and it doesn't necessarily align with what we may be living at that given time. And it's that truth that we then have to deal with. Health is a perfect example of that. Men in my family love themselves to keep, as they say, a cold one. Keep something in their hands, sipping and drinking and alcohol on a regular basis. However, if we were to be honest, what is the impact of alcohol on a regular basis to our bodies, to our minds, to our abilities to rest? And I only use that as one example, but it's part of that truth that we have to deal with. We don't care for it, but we got to deal with it.
Oh man, that's good. So 5 minutes left, and you can share whatever you want that you think would help folks out. What would be the lesson or your mini lesson or your mini teaching that you would say, hey, this is so important that you look at in your life to be able to become and to in this journey to freedom that we're going on, and
Hmm.
what does it mean to be free, or whatever it is that you want to talk about? What would that be?
So much has already been shared.
Mm.
That is enough for folks, I think, to really eat on and digest and continue to reflect on for quite some time. Because what I've just shared over the past hour, I will tell you, took me years. This isn't something,
Yes.
it's not something overnight, but it is the commitment to consistency and quality. We understand it in the marketplace, but do we understand it in our own personal life? We should be eating quality consistently. We should be living quality consistently. We should be spending with a quality mindset consistently. Every aspect of our lives should be quality and done so consistently. That in itself, I think, is what then the reflections of growth for every day. Reflecting, being intentional, thinking about what we've done, the impacts of those things, and does it lead us to our lived or our desired mission and purpose? If there is misalignment in our actions to our mission, we reflect. Taking those moments for reflection, which I then think impacts all other aspects of our life, because then we understand that success is then found in the fulfillment of our purpose. That's where the alignment then happens. That's where real wealth then shows up by quality, living in alignment with what it is that we've been put here to do and doing that consistently.
Absolutely. It's so, you saw me smiling while you were talking right then, because I had written down my last question is what's the importance of consistency? And you answered it. So, I just go, hey, this was meant to be, this is purposeful. And, when I think as I talk to young folks, and want to tell them that who you become, is going to be a lot based on who your inner circle is, the people that you're around, the books and the information that you put into your mind. And so our journey should be one of how can I continue to be around the right people? How do I create those circles of people that are above where I'm at? For me, it's like if I see somebody that I want to emulate or see somebody that I think their life has an aspect, and I really want to pinpoint that and say an aspect, because there's not a whole person that I want to follow, right, other than Christ. But you go, okay, so a person on this planet is really good at this. I want to be around him. I want to be around. How do I start developing those relationships? I start reading about that. I'm reading a lot of Thomas Sowell right now, and his financial stuff. And one of the greatest economists that I probably ever lived, that, but I wasn't ready for it 10 years ago. I wasn't ready for it 50 years ago, right? So what did they say when the student is ready, the teacher will appear? And so, right. So I really want to thank you today on, there is so much. I'm going to have to go back and listen to, our conversations several times, because there was so many good nuggets. And I would suggest for anybody who just heard this the first time, one of the things that I've learned, and I don't know if you do this first, is if I have the opportunity, and I think this day and age with technology and AI and everything else that allows me to do, is if I can just listen the first time and then go back and take notes. And so many things are recorded these days. So many things allow when you and I were coming, we had to take notes furiously, because if we didn't get it, it wasn't going to be said again.
That's right.
But now just to listen, intake, process, then go back after you've recorded and write down those nuggets, and then say, how do they apply to, and like you said, our purpose, the things why God put us on this planet.
That's right.
And the reason, and I pray that every day, that God, would show me how I could serve others in a way that pleases Him.
That's right.
And by doing that with my gifting, and all of us, and he said this before, is we have giftings. There's that thing that what he said before, right? That Dr. Brownlee said before, is the things that you don't think about and you just do anyways, and you love doing it. That's where you pursue. That's where you grow. That's where you move forward. And so, thank you for another great episode of the Journey to Freedom. Thank you for being on and taking your time out. I know how difficult it is when people are super busy in their lives and stuff to take the time. And I believe you've absolutely served others in this setting by doing this today. And I look forward to talking with you. And thank you guys for participating in another Journey of Freedom podcast. And again, Dr. Brownlee, thank you. And we guys will talk with you guys soon. Have a great, wonderful, amazing day.